Hi, this is Dr. Swanberg, and we're going over the sample student essay for the poetry analysis that we're about to turn in. And I wanted to go over it with you in some detail. If we are a virtual class, this is what we did in class. And if you're an online class, this is just to help you understand what we're aiming for and how to use this as a model. So the first thing is that this is your sample essay, and it is a model I'd like you to use very closely. If you see sentences that are that look a certain way, I want you to write a couple of sentences just like those, only on your topic. This was a successful student essay, and you can see that there are things here that, as you read it, that you would change or improve about their diction or their syntax or their punctuation. But they did a really good job getting the elements of the essay in place. And what's more, they did a really good job thinking in this essay. And I'd like to share that with you. Now, the first thing that they do in their first couple of sentences, I think their first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences is that they raised their subject naturally. That means they brought up the theme that they were talking about, and they got the reader's attention by talking about the theme in general. So if you're talking about challenges, or you're talking about racism, or you're talking about loss or grief, or you're talking about choices, or whatever your theme is, you're going to spend a few sentences, 5 or 6 sentences is good. I'm just talking about that theme in general. So theirs looks like this. Loss. What is the meaning of loss? Loss is when you feel grief when someone or something of value is no longer with you. There is often an event in our lives that impacts us so deeply we never really move on from it. Every day someone loses something or someone in their life. Loss can be a painful, indescribable feeling. So again, they're raising the subject of loss and talking about it for a few sentences, and they're being very patient with that, and I appreciate that. The next thing they're going to do is set the scene for the reader and put things in context and let us know that this is an essay about some poems. And they do that very simply. They say many poems deal with the theme of loss. In fact, poems by 20th century poets Elizabeth Bishop, Robert Frost, and Langston Hughes all deal with feelings of grief. So again, they're taking it from this very, very general idea about loss to, hey, there are 3 poems that I'm going to talk about that deal with this theme. And then underlined, we have their thesis statement. And we're going to break this into sections and talk about it. It says, in One Art, The Road Not Taken, an April song, we can see losing a loved one is a hard path to take. And that is, in the first half, they do 2 things. They list their poems, and they tell their theme, losing a loved one. So the first half of that sentence says what the poems are and the theme. And then the second half of the sentence tells us the thesis. Letting go of the pain can lead to a happier ending. And that's the part that's arguable. And again, we're talking about theme versus thesis like we did in the handout on theme versus thesis. And we've gone from theme, losing a loved one is hard, to thesis, something arguable, which is letting go of the pain can lead to a happier ending. And that is arguable. Letting go doesn't always make us happy. And you could argue that. The next thing they do is they give a preview sentence for each of the poems that they're going to use as examples of this pain can lead to a happier ending. In Elizabeth Bishop's poem, One Art, she says letting go is an art that can be mastered. Just a little preview of what they're going to talk about. In Road Not Taken, Frost shows that it is best to choose the path of light when at any crossroad. And then in April Rain Song, Langston Hughes shows us how to let rain wash away our pain. So you can see that they're giving a little preview and letting us know how each of these poems proves this thesis that letting go of the pain can lead to a happier ending. So they're saying, okay, this one proves it, this one proves it, and this one proves it. And they've done that in 3 separate sentences, 1 for each example. Then we have 2 sentences just getting us ready for the first body paragraph. So that's your thesis paragraph in a nutshell. We're going to take a look at some major features of the body paragraphs. I'm going to go to their best body paragraph. And this is the one that I'm going to use as the sample here, although all of their paragraphs do this to greater or lesser degree. But this one is particularly good. Now, the first thing they have in their body paragraph is a topic sentence. And the topic sentence's job is to connect this paragraph to the thesis. And when I first read their thesis paragraph, I thought, why would you choose the road not taken to talk about grief? It's not about that. And then I read this topic sentence, and it says, with pain that comes with loss, we can choose to take a path that will bring light and joy into our life, or we can choose a path of darkness. And I thought, oh, it can work, right? So that's the power of a topic sentence, to connect this poem to your thesis. It's especially important if you're choosing a poem where it's not obvious how it connects to your thesis. And they did a really good job on the topic sentence here. Okay, then they start talking about the poem. They introduce it by title and author in a sentence by itself. In the poem, The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost, it tells us how choosing a path can be difficult. You might say he tells us how choosing a path can be difficult, but it's okay. Then he quotes from it. Notice he doesn't just dive into quoting. He introduces the poem first. Frost says, and there should be a comma there. I'll put one in just so you can see it happen. Frost says, comma, quote, two roads diverged in a yellow wood, comma, slash, to mark the line break. And sorry I could not travel both. And then he says line 2. Then he analyzes it and says, with this quote, it tells us as readers we have two paths and we cannot choose both. Losing a loved one is never easy. This is why there are two paths you can choose to go down when you lose someone. We could choose the dark and gloomy path, or we can choose the path where there is light and joy. So he's doing a really careful analysis, showing me what he wants me to see in that quote. He doesn't just say that means there's two roads in the wood, right? He does a really good job explaining what I'm supposed to see in those lines. He continues in his poem by saying, comma, quote, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. He uses the word claim to show he thinks the path is better for him. He chose the path because it was grassy and wanted wear, meaning it has not been chosen very much and remained bright and green. Line 8, notice there's a quote here, and he doesn't cite it until the end of the sentence. That is correct. He doesn't need to put the citation in a place where it will interrupt his thoughts. He puts that citation at the end of the sentence where it does not interrupt his thoughts. And then again, he ends the paragraph with analysis of explaining what he wants me to see in those lines. Okay, and then they do the same thing with April's Rain Song, which again, they had to do some convincing to get me to think that this matched. But you can see when you read this that they did a really good job explaining how the poem proves the thesis. And that's the job of every body paragraph, is to prove how this poem proves the thesis. Okay? So I'll let you read the other two body paragraphs on your own and just admire them and see how they work in the same way. Topic sentence, introduce the title and author, quote 3 times with analysis in between, and then make sure you end with your analysis. In the concluding paragraph, we go back over it again. It's almost like doing the thesis paragraph only in reverse with a little more confidence behind what you're saying because you've proved it. He's looking at how all 3 of the poems work together. Each poem has its own unique meaning that shows the reader if they accept what they have lost and let it go, it will lead to a beautiful ending. And then again, he shows us how that happened in One Art. Another sentence shows us how that happened in Road Not Taken. The next sentence shows us how that happened in April Rain Song. And then the rest of this paragraph is him thinking nice and patiently about how to answer that big so what question. Why is it important for your reader to understand what these poems are teaching. What's at stake for the reader if they don't understand what the poets are trying to teach us? And maybe even end by giving your reader some advice about dealing with grief or loss or whatever or racism or challenge in their life or whatever the theme is. So again, that is the model, and I want you to follow the model very carefully, really sentence for sentence if you need to, if you're unsure of your essay writing skills. And please notice that each of the steps follows the steps in this essay jobs checklist. And each of the steps of source use go right here. Again, in last week's assignment, or in this week's assignment, one of the things that you're doing is that poetry close reading paragraph draft, that assignment where you're close reading that paragraph and using the quotes, that is modeled for you in that student essay. So no matter what point you're at with that, definitely make sure you're using the model. And if you have questions about using the model, reach out to me in a help session or reach out by email to set up a time to talk about it in Zoom.